Good morning. Good to be with you. I hope you're warm. We are in the teeth of frigidness in Mississippi. I am cold. I am freezing. My feet are cold. I have on many layers. So just pray for me. I'm like a little chihuahua that goes outside in the cold and realizes, no, this is not for, I was not made for this. I just was not. I was not made for the cold. So stay warm wherever you are. Stay safe. So we're just gonna get through this together, y'all. Some of y'all are loving it. I am not one of the people loving it. So we're gonna pick up today with Esther 4. Today is we're gonna read one of those every nearly every book of the Bible has a verse that people turn to and say, "Oh yes, that's the book with this verse." You know, Ecclesiastes, time and season. Many books are full of so many of them. Isaiah has so many. The Gospels have so many. But today we're going to read um, from Esther 4, and it has the verse that, if you know anything about Esther, or have heard any sermons on Esther, it has the verse that Esther is most known for. So it's Esther chapter 4, verse 14. Let's read through this chapter and see how we get there. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he only went as far as the king's gate, because no one in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province whence the edict and order came, there was great mourning among the Jews, many fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. So Esther summoned Hadok, one of the king's eunuchs, and assigned him as eunuchs assigned to attend to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hadok went to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him of everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay from the royal treasury for the destruction of Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa. To show to Esther, they explained it to her. He told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence and beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hadok went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. And then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they should be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. So this is the for such a time as this. That is, you've probably heard you've probably heard sermons or revivals or youth. I think I've heard more youth messages about for such a time as this. But that is the famous passage. Perhaps you have arisen to this place for such a time as this. And that is the lesson, the word that Mordecai gives to Esther, that who knows, maybe the Lord has placed you in this position here for this moment now. But I hope you're now seeing how many things we saw earlier are coming into play as we gather into this moment. Because if you had just read, if you just read this chapter here without the backstory of how erratic the king is, you would think, oh, come on, Esther. I know he's the king, and kings are often rough and tumble, but just go and talk to him. How bad can it be? But the previous chapters spent a lot of time establishing just how irrational and how vengeful the king can be. So we've seen Vashti, who was his queen before. We see him put her out, cast her out, simply because she didn't come in when he wanted. We've seen the fact that he got so mad at her, he kicked her out and then kind of forgot what happened. Remember that a few chapters ago? So we see that the story of Esther has spent so much time showing us how powerful, how off the handle the king is. So this isn't some ordinary ask that Mordecai is asking of Esther. In fact, all the evidence we have up to this date would lead us to assume that more likely than not, this is going to fail, and more likely than not, Esther will be killed. So thus she says, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So this is setting the scene for what appears to be in the story. If you're just going to follow along what we know thus far, it's not going to change anything. And Esther's probably going to die. That's so that is the task that Esther has against her. And so it's important to know the breadth of the story to understand how significant this is. And that's why it's important to have read the chapters we read before, setting everything in motion to come to this point. But there's that great verse for such a time as this. For such a time as this is perhaps, and who knows that for you for that you have come to this royal position for such a time as this. And I also love what Mordecai says that, hey, listen, you know what? Here's the deal. If you remain silent, God's going to save the Jews. How many fires has God pulled the Jewish people out from in the past? God's got this. Like, he's got this. We're going to fast. We're going to pray. But we know that God's got this. So speak or don't speak. God's going to save his people. God's going to save his people. Now, just so you know, you're in a high position. It doesn't mean you're going to be saved. You'll be destroyed in your family. But God's going to save his people. And maybe God has you where he has you for this reason. I just love that concept. We're not all Queen Esther. You know, we're not all royalty or in power, in positions of great power, or things such as that. In fact, very few of us are. In fact, you keep reading the Bible, you'll see that so often many of the New Testament writers will remind the people, not many of you come from great estate. So it's not to say that all of us watching this or listening to this come from powerful positions, because the truth is very few of us do. Very few of us do. But I do believe this story reminds us that perhaps all of us, perhaps God has all of us in the place he has us, in the position he has us, that God has us where he wants us for this moment. Maybe there's a word that you can say to your coworker that only you can say. Maybe there's an encouragement or a challenge that you can give to a family member that only you can give. Maybe, maybe there's something that God has to be done that only you can do. And it may seem like a task that's too great or a task that's too high or something that you can't accomplish. Perhaps we may feel like Esther, like, well, Lord, I can't do this. It's too much. But who knows? Perhaps God has you where he has you, in the position he has you, in the place he has you, in the moment he has you for such a time as this. So today, be faithful. Be faithful wherever it is God has placed you. Be faithful for wherever it is God is working with you. Be faithful. And know that God uh, is going to do great things. Just be faithful. We see that Esther was where God wanted her so that the time of deliverance would come. So today, just perhaps Perhaps it was for such a time as this that God has you where he has you. Be faithful. Thanks for being with us. Stay warm. We'll pick up tomorrow with chapter 5. Have a great day.